What's shakin' bacons? I'm coming at you today with a movie review on the Polka King, starring Jack Black. I can't stop laughing at it because I never thought I'd like this movie. I never thought that I would want to watch a movie about polka, but here we are, and I do, and it's very enjoyable. So let's talk about the Polka King. The movie was directed by Maya Forbes, who now has 2 directing credits to her name, including this one. The other one is Infinitely Polar Bear, which I have never heard of before now. This is my first encounter with her as a director. It is also, I believe, my first encounter with her as a writer/producer, because she has got some writer-producer credits to her name, including Monster vs. Aliens. I have a secret. I still haven't seen Monsters vs. Aliens, and like everybody I know is mad at me for that. And the Trolls movie, neither of which I have seen. So this is truly my first foray into anything that is Maya Forbes related. So the story, it is based on a true story of this guy named Jan Lewan, and he was a polka player. He was the lead of this polka band that he started in Pennsylvania, who tried to build kind of an empire in order to support himself and his family, and at least according to the movie anyway, unwittingly begins a Ponzi scheme in an effort to try and raise money for them to make it big and to pay for his bandmates and his friends, and to make sure that he's caring for his son and his wife and his mother-in-law to the best of his abilities. And so this is the movie and the story of how he started getting embroiled in this accidental Ponzi scheme, and then how it goes downhill from there. So you would not ordinarily think, at least I wouldn't ordinarily think, I was like, this movie is not for me. I would not watch this. I hate polka. This is just not my style of movie, but I love Jack Black. I think he's hilarious. He's a fantastic actor. And I think I've mentioned in a previous video that Mr. Hub's parents called us one day, and they live in Rhode Island, and they were like, you'll never believe this, we just met Jack Black, because this movie was filmed for the most part in and around the area where my husband grew up. So we really wanted to see it. If for nothing else, then we wanted to see if he could recognize different landmarks and places from his childhood, and that was the case, which was really kind of fun for him and for me to experience that through him. So ordinarily we would not, we'd be like, polka, all right, you know, like hard pass. But this was actually a really fun movie. It was much more enjoyable than I would have thought, and I would definitely recommend giving it a try. With that said, it's not a perfect movie. I think Jack Black definitely carries the film. So we're going to talk about some of what I thought about it, some of its issues, and the acting and all those kind of things. Talking about the story, first of all, what's most interesting to me is it's based on a real story. I know nothing about polka. Gotta be honest, I don't really care about polka. If you do, I'm so sorry if I've insulted you, but just not my thing. Just like, you know, rap isn't some people's thing, just like rock isn't some people's thing. Polka just ain't my thing. It was enjoyable, even for someone who does not like polka, who knew nothing about the character or the story behind it. And there were some really, really brilliant moments in this movie that stood out. There were great, like, local ad parodies that perfectly captured how horribly awkward local advertisements are for small businesses, right down to horrible timing and Jack Black being just awkward on the camera. The way that they describe polka to other people in the movie, they're like, papa, papa. That papa music to just describe in general what the genre is. And I couldn't stop laughing at how in some of the scenes there were people who were probably very obviously not part of the movie, had no idea what was going on, and they were just reacting in real time to Jack Black and Jason Schwartzman acting outrageous in public, and that was quite funny to witness. You know, there's a couple moments that are just like, they really stand out. Like there's this slow motion, triumphant post-Pope walk, which you have to see the movie. I'm not going to explain it. It's very funny. His enthusiasm, his like sheer giddy enthusiasm at getting arrested at the end of the movie, how he casually just gets shanked at one point and there's absolutely no change in the song or the sound effects. It just happens and he's still peppy and you're just like, oh, he just casually got shanked in the neck and it didn't even faze him. Because he's just such like a cheerful dude. And then like at the end of the movie, there's like this old people smackdown in the parking lot of a Benny's, which is very funny to watch. And they just start yelling at each other and literally like smacking one another. And there's just some genuinely fantastic comedic timing and scenes in this film. So you notice a couple things in terms of cinematography that's very interesting. You know, there's a creative use of overhead perspective that starts at the beginning of the film to really show Jan Lewan's character and what he's thinking on and what he's focusing on. And then as he goes through the film and he gets more and more out of control, you'll find that that use of the overhead perspective gets phased out as he loses grasp of what's happening, because this eventually grows beyond him. At least that's the way the film portrays it. And it was just very, very fun. In terms of acting, acting was not quite there. Jack Black was great. He's hilarious. He's a good actor. You could tell he really got into the character. He really got into the story. He carried the whole film. Jenny Slate also did a good job, but Jack Black really did carry the whole film as the main character. And he often echoed on his face the exact feelings that I was currently having toward what was occurring in the film. So for example, there's a scene where it's revealed that Mickey Pizzazz and Barb, the mother-in-law, are having an affair. When he finds out that they're having this affair, he had the most disgusted look on his face, which was exactly the look I had when it was first revealed in the movie that they were. He was just like, like, oh, really? And that's exactly how I felt. And then there's another scene where his wife just has this existential crisis breakdown as she's announcing him one evening. And just as Mr. Hubbs and I looked at each other like, whoa, she's just cracking on stage, it just shoots to Jack Black peeking out of the curtain like, oh my God, she's having a full breakdown. So it was really fun, and he did this wonderful, mischievous fourth wall break at the end of the movie. And I don't always like fourth wall breaking in a movie. I think if it's done well, it can be really fun and a great addition to the cinematography, but sometimes it's not handled well. This movie, it was handled well, and he broke the fourth wall at the end of the movie, and he was just so mischievous, and Jack Black just gets like this twinkle in his eye, and it was great. I laughed out loud. Jenny Slate, also great job. She definitely played against, I have this, most of my encounters with her as an actress is purely Parks and Recreation. So in my head, she's Mona Lisa, you know, like, I have never done anything wrong ever in my life. Money, please. So in my head, that's who Jenny Slate is. She's just very selfish and self-centered and living in the moment. And it was nice to see a different side of Jenny Slate's acting abilities and see her play Marla, who was just this woman who was very supportive of her husband, even though she started feeling as though she was overshadowed because she had been in the spotlight before she married him, and he started getting famous and having all these investors invest in his business. So I thought she also did a great job. Those two really were the best actors in this movie. You know, unfortunately, I think that I enjoy seeing Jason Schwartzman in films, but I almost felt like he really just phoned it in this film. He had some good moments, like when he doesn't know if they're going to be able to meet the Pope, and he just turns around and there's like these two huge angel wings of sweat. Like he is just completely sweaty and the Pope doesn't want to touch him, and he's like, oh my gosh, the Pope didn't even want to touch me. Like there are some genuinely funny moments, but honestly, I almost feel like it was less to do with his acting and more to do with how well those scenes were written, because it almost just seemed as though he was just kind of checked out the whole movie, and maybe he didn't want to be there, maybe he just wasn't that enthused about the character he was playing, but regardless, I kind of felt like he phoned it in. And then the other very dominant character, and I won't spend much time talking about the other characters, but the other dominant character was the mother-in-law, who was played by Jackie Weaver. And she was fine, but she really had just like one sequence of emotions that she pulled out every scene she was in terms of what she displayed on her face as she was acting. And she really just had kind of one go-to voice tone and voice pitch. And it made every time she was on screen very repetitive to watch. And it got to a point where, as we were going through the movie, and it's a little over 1.5 hours, I started to kind of dread seeing her return to the screen because it was starting to become almost like deja vu for me. Like, okay, I've already seen you squawk. You have essentially the same lines over and over and the same expression every time. Your delivery is not a whole lot different. Like, I would be really grateful if you could change it up. And she didn't change it up. And, you know, there were other large names and memorable faces in the movie, but they're all pretty ultimately forgettable in the shadow of Jack Black's overwhelmingly positive look at me embodiment of Jan Lewan. So overall, I think the acting was really where this movie had a lot of difficulties. The music was phenomenal. It had such a fun, quirky soundtrack. There were character undertones, like there was a deeper musical sequence when you could tell Jack Black and as Jan Lewan was struggling morally with what was going on inside of his head and with his morals and what he was going to do with the investments that people were giving him. I thought that my favorite part of the movie was this funny love song that Jan Lewan sings to his wife Marla as she aerobicizes to get ready for her Miss Pennsylvania pageant, and it's fantastic. And I'm not normally one for duets in the middle of a film. I talked about how I did not like that in The Shape of Water. The reason I like that in this movie is A, it's a movie about a musician and his band. B, there was him singing in different scenes where there was all musical, all about the band, all about him and his voice throughout the movie, so it did not stand out in a bad way. It was there, it wrapped in the way it should have, so it was perfect. Jenny Slate was hilarious in that scene. It reminded me of the Crystal Light competitions that they used to have in the 80s, and if you haven't seen those, please do yourself a favor and look them up. Just quickly open a new tab of YouTube, type in Crystal Light Championships, and enjoy. You're welcome. So the music was fantastic. I loved it. The music was composed by Theodore Shapiro. Good on ya. It was great. It wasn't too in-your-face polka. It was a good balance. It was fun. It was just quirky enough, and it made you kind of like, there was a couple times where I noticed I was kind of like wiggling to the music and my foot was tapping, and I'm not a polka person and it was not all polka. It was just very enjoyable. You couldn't help but get yourself into the movie. You couldn't help but get invested in it. However, in addition to some of the difficulty that I experienced in terms of believability from the actors, there was also some issues with detail in this movie. Some of the details were sloppy. Like, the movie did not do a good job at demonstrating the time frame and the past that they were aiming for. Like, they tried to get time period specific vehicles and they dressed the characters in time specific clothing, but there was a couple outfits that you could see on some of the band members or the audience members or in the pageants where I would look at the clothing and I go, oh, I've seen that dress on Amazon recently. Or, you know, you would look at passerby, like I mentioned before, who are wearing modern clothes with modern accessories. In the background of scenes, you could very obviously tell that the time period was in the current day based on the scenery, newer vehicles driving behind them, things like that. There was a couple tells, and it just made me feel as though it was a little bit sloppy in terms of trying to put you into this time period where Jan Lewan and his polka empire existed, and he was able to con all of these elderly people into giving him their money. And another thing that bothered me, and this was rather minor, was their method of aging the characters. They didn't successfully age them at all. Really, the only things that changed throughout the time intervals that they had in the film were at the end they tried to age the son by just dumping him into a suit, and he said he came from work, and it reminded me of how horribly the Harry Potter finale tried to age those characters. And you know, Jason Schwartzman's hair was like a little bit longer, and Jack Black had a scar on his neck from his casual shanking session. And, you know, the hairstyles changed a little bit, but overall, I don't think they did a great job in terms of paying attention to the details of the time period. And granted, that may be due to a restricted budget. Maybe they were trying to get it out on time or ahead of schedule. These are things that I just don't know that could have impacted that kind of quality of double checking, ensuring consistency, ensuring a full immersive experience. But that was a problem for me. And again, the acting was disappointing, I think, other than Jack Black and Jenny Slate. It really just kind of seemed like everyone else phoned it in, which was disappointing. But you really are so riveted by Jack Black that it kind of just, you forget about the bad acting. So I think my final verdict for this movie overall is a 6 out of 10. And while that's not a high rating, I do recommend that people see this because it is fun. I had a big grin on my face from the beginning of the movie all the way through the end. There were some genuinely brilliant comedic moments in there. Jack Black is a delight in this movie. Even if you don't like polka, it's very fun to watch. But there are issues with the acting. There were problems with attention to details. And thinking about it after the fact, honestly, if it had been anyone other than Jack Black as the main character, I honestly don't know if I could have finished the film. And in terms of my 6 out of 10 rating, when I look at critic scores and when I look at user scores, overall, the audience appeared to like the movie. So I'm looking at the ratings for the Polka King, and it looks as though 85% of Google users like the movie. And I have to say, this is a new feature that Google's been introducing lately, and I really enjoy this because it's a very quick gauge. It's not on a sliding scale. People can just say yay or nay. And 85% of people like this movie. It's got a 67% blanket score on Rotten Tomatoes, a 5.7 out of 10 on IMDb. And in terms of the split between audience and critics on Rotten Tomatoes, it's almost nil because 61% of the critics liked it and 60% of the audience liked it. So this is another movie where I think that public opinion and formal critic opinion is coming in about even. And I would say 6 out of 10 is probably where I come to. But it's a good movie. I recommend giving it a shot. It's very lighthearted, if nothing else. It's something very different and out of the norm. And it's fun to experience the life of this Polka King through the portrayal of Jack Black and his boisterous personality. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Like, comment, subscribe, etc. Everything that YouTubers say. You can also catch me on Twitch, of course, Traveler's Warden. I do have a Twitter now, so you can find me on Twitter, and that's where I will announce when I'm streaming live on Twitch, if you want to catch me there. And I'll make notes about videos on here that are coming up or maybe that I've posted. So if you have any movies you guys want me to see, want me to talk about, let me know in the comments below. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.